At my son's 35th birthday party, my daughter-in-law leaned in and whispered that I was only there because they pitied me. She told me to move out soon. I simply nodded. She had no clue that the penthouse we stood in, the Tesla in the garage, and the black card in her purse all legally belonged to me. That nod was not agreement. It was the moment I decided to take it all back. My name is Eleanor Marsh. I am 61 years old. And tonight, I am invisible. I stand in the shadow of the massive stainless steel refrigerator, watching the light from the crystal chandelier refract off the diamond earrings of my daughter-in-law's friends. The air in the penthouse smells of expensive cologne, roasted duck, and the sharp scent of arrogance. It is my son Daniel's 35th birthday, and the living room is packed with 30 of his and Brianna's closest acquaintances. The apartment is located in the Skyline district of Denver, a place where the glass walls offer a panoramic view of the city lights burning below us. To the guests here, I am just a fixture of the background, a grey-haired woman in a sensible blouse and slacks who clears the empty glasses. I move through the crowd, collecting sticky champagne flutes from the coasters. Oh, thank you. Ms. Eleanor, a young woman in a backless sequin dress, says to me. She hands me a crumpled napkin without looking at my face, treating me with the polite dismissal one reserves for hired help. I do not say anything. I take the trash and march back to the open kitchen island to wipe down the marble counter for the 10th time this hour. Brianna stands in the center of the room, holding court. She is wearing a silk dress that costs more than she thinks I receive in a year of pension payments. She swirls her Pinot Noir and raises her voice just enough for it to carry over the jazz music playing on the sound system. It is a sacrifice. You know, Brianna says, sighing dramatically. She glances toward the kitchen to make sure I can hear her. Daniel and I, well, we just have big hearts. We couldn't let poor Eleanor struggle on the street. It is not easy having an extra mouth to feed, but we do what we must. I grip the wet rag in my hand. I scrub a spot of dried sauce on the counter until my knuckles turn white. The conversation among the guests shifts to the rising cost of real estate in downtown Denver. A man in a tailored blue suit shakes his head. The market is brutal. The maintenance fees in this building alone must be astronomical. Brianna laughs. It is a sharp, brittle sound. She turns her head and locks eyes with me across the room. The benevolence on her face twists into something colder. Tell me about it. She says loud enough for the entire room to silence itself. Daniel and I only want to help you. Auntie. But this house isn't a charity. The room goes dead silent. The guests look from her to me, sensing the sudden hostility. Brianna takes a step toward the kitchen, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Actually, since everyone is here, she says, smiling with her teeth but not her eyes. Daniel and I have been talking. When we decide to have a baby, we are going to need that guest room for a nursery. So, it is probably best if you start looking for a place that fits, well, a place that fits your capabilities. I freeze. I look at my son. Daniel is leaning against the granite countertop near the balcony door. His face is flushed red from the 3 glasses of scotch he has consumed. He feels the weight of his wife's stare, and he looks down at his Italian leather shoes. Daniel, I ask. My voice is steady, but my chest feels tight. He looks up, his eyes glassy and evasive. He clears his throat, struggling to find his voice under the pressure of the room. She is right. Mom. Daniel stammers. He takes a nervous sip of his drink. If you want to stay, well, you really need to contribute. Rent, electricity, water. It is only fair to make it equal. The silence stretches out for 5 seconds. Then, a murmur of agreement ripples through the crowd. I see heads nodding. Brianna's mother, a woman with stiff blonde hair who is sitting on the velvet sofa, lets out a loud sigh. Exactly, she says, swirling the ice in her glass. The older generation really needs to stop clinging to their children. You have to cut the cord eventually. I feel the blood rush to my face. It burns hot against my cheeks. The heavy silver tray in my hands begins to vibrate because my arms are shaking uncontrollably. I look at the marble countertop. I look at the wine in their glasses. I look at the floor-to-ceiling windows that I paid for. I want to scream. I want to tell them that the deed to this penthouse does not have Daniel's name on it. I want to tell them that the electricity they are worried about is paid via auto-pay from a West Wind Meridian account. But I do not. I set the tray down on the counter with a deliberate clack. The sound cuts through the murmurs. I unclench my hands and take a slow breath. Thank you for giving me a place to stay temporarily. I say. My voice does not crack. I will move out soon. I nod once. I turn my back on them before anyone can say another word. I walk out of the kitchen, down the hallway, and away from the party, leaving the laughter and the judgment behind me. I close the door to the guest room, and the latch clicks with a finality that echoes in my chest. That small sound severs the connection between two worlds. The jazz music and the shrill laughter of Brianna's friends are instantly muffled, reduced to a dull, rhythmic vibration against the wood. Inside here, the air is still. There is only the low hum of the mini-fridge in the corner and the heavy, thumping beat of my own heart. I do not cry. Tears are for the helpless, and I am not helpless. I feel a cold numbness spreading through my chest, freezing the humiliation of the last hour into something solid and sharp. I walk over to the bookshelf filled with paperback novels I bought at thrift stores. They are props, carefully chosen to support the character I have played for 5 years. I push aside a row of romance paperbacks to reveal the small safe embedded in the wall behind them. My fingers move automatically over the keypad. 3, 8, 1, 9. It is the month and year my late husband, Jack, and I bought our very first truck. The mechanism whirs, and the heavy door swings open. Inside lies the truth I have kept buried. I pull out a thick manila folder and a small, black velvet box. On the cover of the folder, embossed in silver, is a logo that looks like a stylized windrose compass. Below it are the words, West Wind Meridian Group. I sit on the edge of the bed and open the file. The first document is the property deed for this penthouse. My eyes scan the legal text, though I know it by heart. The owner of record is West Wind Meridian Group. In the margins. The internal notation reads clearly, Beneficial owner Eleanor Marsh, 85% equity. I flip the page. The registration for the white Tesla Model X parked in the basement garage sits there, also registered to the corporate fleet. They drive my car. They live in my house. And tonight, they told me to leave. I open the velvet box next. Inside sits a Centurion card, heavy and made of black titanium. It is cold to the touch. This is the primary card. The one Brianna keeps in her designer purse, the one she swipes for her spa days and organic groceries without ever looking at the bill, is merely a supplementary card issued on this account. I authorized it 3 years ago. I wanted to make their lives easier. I wanted them to be happy. My mind drifts back to the boardroom table 5 years ago. I see the polished mahogany and the view of the Denver skyline, a view I own. I remember picking up the pen. Marcus Hale, my CEO, sat across from me, looking concerned. "Are you sure about this?" Eleanor Marcus had asked. His brow furrowed. "Stepping back completely. Letting people think you are just retired. I am tired." "Marcus," I had replied, my voice weary. "I want to be a mother, not a chairman. Let Daniel think I am just a retired nurse living on a fixed income. Maybe then he will love me for me, not the checkbook." I signed the papers that day, granting Marcus the face of the company while I retained the iron grip of the majority shareholder. I look up from the papers and catch my reflection in the vanity mirror. I see a 61-year-old woman with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. The face staring back is a map of hard roads. The deep lines around my eyes were not carved by leisure or spa treatments. They were etched by wind, diesel fumes, and sleepless nights. I remember sleeping upright in the cabin of an 18-wheeler parked at a rest stop in Oklahoma, clutching a tire iron because the lot was too dark. I remember negotiating freight contracts at 2 a.m. with men who thought they could bully a woman. I built an empire of logistics and warehouses from nothing but grit, and my son thinks I cannot afford to pay for electricity. Why did I let this charade go on for so long? Why did I nod and smile when Brianna made snide comments about my limited means? I look at my hands. They are rougher than Brianna's manicured fingers will ever be. Because I was weak. I whisper to the empty room. Because I was afraid that without the need for my help, they would not want me around at all. I allowed them to treat me like a charity case because being a burden was better than being alone. But tonight, the price of admission to their lives became too high. They did not just bite the hand that fed them, they tried to sever it. I pick up my phone. The screen illuminates the dark room with a harsh blue light. I scroll through the contacts, bypassing Daniel's name. I stop at Marcus, WMG, and Olivia, counsel. My thumb hovers over the call button. The trembling in my hand stops. The coldness in my chest settles into a steely resolve. I am done playing the poor relation. No more. I say aloud. I press the button. It is time to remind them who actually owns the roof over their heads. The silence is over. The smell of my youth is not perfume or fresh-cut grass. It is diesel fuel, stale cigarette smoke, and burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup. 30 years ago, I was not a silent shareholder living in a guest room. I was 20 years old, wiping grease off tables in a roadside diner in Oklahoma. That was where I met Jack Marsh. He was a man made of rough edges and silence, a long-haul trucker who treated me like I was made of porcelain. We got married 3 months later with a ring that cost $200 at a pawn shop. We lived our marriage on the asphalt of Interstate 40. The cab of his Peterbilt was our living room and our bedroom. While Jack drove through the night, his eyes scanning for black ice, I sat in the passenger seat with a flashlight and a ledger. I watched the manifests. I saw how the logistics world worked, and it made me sick. The big freight brokers were skimming 30% off the top. They charged storage fees that did not exist and squeezed the drivers until there was nothing left but exhaustion. Then came the winter of 1995. Jack jackknifed on a slick patch outside of Wichita. He survived, but his leg was shattered. We sat in a grim hospital room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, looking at a pile of medical bills. "We are finished." "L," Jack had whispered, staring at the cast on his leg. I can't. I can't drive for months. We lose the contract. I looked at him, and then I looked at the ledger I had brought with me. I realized that as long as we were just the hands on the steering wheel, we were disposable. No, I said, my voice hard. If we stay employees, we die on this road. We need to own the wheels. Jack, we are going to buy our own rig. We took out a loan with an interest rate that should have been illegal. We started Marsh Hall and Link. It was the grandfather of Westwind Meridian, but back then, it was just us and a terrifying amount of debt. We took the jobs nobody else wanted. We hauled hazardous materials through snowstorms. We did midnight runs on Christmas Eve. We traded sleep for margin. I became the brain to Jack's muscle. I taught myself how to use Excel on a computer that hummed like a lawnmower. I learned to read the fine print in contracts that were designed to trap people like us. I spent hours on payphones, screaming at warehouse managers who tried to cheat us out of detention pay. I remember standing in a dock manager's office in Kansas City, slamming a manifest down on his desk. He was a large man who thought he could intimate a young woman in flannel. "You docked us 2 hours for unloading," I told him, staring him dead in the eye. "My driver was at the gate at 4. Your forklift broke. That is your cost, not mine. Fix the invoice, or I pull every truck we have from this lane by morning." He fixed the invoice. I learned that day that fear was a better currency than kindness. Over the next 10 years, we went from 1 truck to a fleet of 50. But I saw the writing on the wall. The real money was not in the tires. It was in the concrete. It was in the warehouses, the transfer hubs, and the data that controlled the flow of goods. I pushed Jack to leverage everything we had to buy land near the rail lines. Then, when our son Daniel was 12 years old, the engine stopped. Jack died of a massive heart attack right there on the floor of our first warehouse. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. I did not have the luxury of collapsing. I buried my husband on a Tuesday, and on Thursday, I signed the papers that transformed our trucking company into Westwind Meridian Group. I shifted our focus from transport to real estate and logistics infrastructure. I stood on the metal catwalk of the first distribution center we built, looking down at the maze of conveyor belts and the army of forklifts moving below. The noise was deafening, a symphony of industry that I had conducted. I thought of Daniel, safe at a private school, oblivious to the grit under my fingernails. Daniel will not drive a truck like his father, I said to the empty air, my voice drowned out by the machinery. He will never know the cold of a cab in January. But he will learn the price of every single mile. I just never thought I would have to destroy his life to teach him that lesson. The road to that humiliating night in the penthouse was paved with my own good intentions. It started when Daniel graduated with his degree in interior design. He was talented, certainly. But talent does not pay the bills in a city like Denver. He believed he floated through university on a combination of merit scholarships and federal loans. He never knew that the scholarship fund was endowed by an anonymous donor, or that the donor was me. I wanted him to feel the pride of earning his way, even if I had to rig the game to let him win. Then he met Brianna. She was a corporate attorney, the kind of woman who grew up with ski trips to Aspen and summers in the Hamptons. To her, Daniel was a charming fixer-upper. He had the right taste, the right jawline, but the wrong bank account balance. I remember the day they came to me, complaining about the housing market. We were sitting in a coffee shop, and Brianna was looking at listings on her phone with a curled lip. "It is impossible," Daniel said, running a hand through his hair. Everything decent in the Skyline district is asking for $4,000 a month. We can't swing that on my junior salary, even with Brianna's income. I took a sip of my black coffee, hiding the calculation in my eyes. I knew of a unit in one of Westwind Meridian's flagship buildings that had been sitting vacant because we used it for visiting executives. I might know someone, I said carefully. A property management group I did some consulting for back in the day. They have a corporate rate for friends and family. I set it up beautifully. I had Marcus draft a lease agreement from Westwind Meridian Group. The market value was $4,500 a month. The price listed on Daniel's contract was $1,600. When Daniel sat down to sign the lease, I held my breath. The company logo was right there at the top. The signatory for the landlord was Marcus Hale. If Daniel had asked a single question, or even Googled the company name, the whole charade would have unraveled. But he did not. He just saw the low price and scribbled his signature. "You are a lifesaver, Mom," he said, grinning. "I don't know how you pulled strings with a big company like this, but thanks. Just read the fine print next time," I murmured. But he was already showing Brianna the view. The generosity did not stop at the rent. A few months later, I gave Daniel a credit card. It was a supplementary card on my black account. "This is for medical emergencies," I told him sternly. "Or if your car breaks down." 2 weeks later, the charges started rolling in. A day at the Four Seasons Spa, a vintage leather handbag, a weekend getaway to Napa Valley. When I gently asked Daniel about it, Brianna answered for him during Sunday dinner. "Oh, Eleanor." "Don't worry," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "We treat it like a company perk. Since you worked with them, I assumed it was part of the benefits package. We don't want to waste the points." "Right." I said nothing. I paid the bill. Then came the Tesla. Daniel had started his own firm and felt insecure pulling up to client meetings in his 10-year-old sedan. He asked if I knew anyone who leased cars. I signed a fleet authorization form allowing him to use a company vehicle, a white Model X. "It is just for 6 months." "Mom," Daniel promised, his eyes pleading. "Just until I land my first big contract. I need to look successful to be successful." 6 months turned into 3 years. The car became his car. The apartment became their penthouse. For 3 years. I watched from the sidelines. I lived in my dusty apartment in Rivergate, driving my beat-up pickup truck. Meanwhile, I scrolled through social media and saw Brianna posting photos of my living room and my car. Her captions were always things like, "When you marry talent," or "self-made life." I created a fantasy world for them, hoping it would give them a head start. Instead, it made them delusional. They began to believe the lie. They believed they deserved the luxury because they were special, not because I was subsidizing it. The worst part was watching Brianna isolate him. I remember hearing her whisper to him at a barbecue last summer, "We don't need anyone. Daniel." She had hissed when he suggested inviting me on their vacation. "We built this life ourselves. Your mother is sweet, but she is just dead weight now." I stayed silent then, too. I thought I was protecting him. I did not realize I was feeding the monster that would eventually try to eat me alive. I step out onto the small balcony attached to the guest room. The wind at this altitude is biting, cutting through my thin blouse, but I do not shiver. I stare down at the grid of Denver. The city looks like a circuit board from up here, buzzing with energy and indifference. In the distance, I see the faint outline of the highway I used to drive 30 years ago. I can almost feel the vibration of the steering wheel in my hands and the ache in my lower back from hauling cargo across state lines. Then, the memory is shattered by the echo of Brianna's voice inside my head. "We felt sorry for you." The sentence hangs in the cold air. It is not an insult anymore. It is a declaration of war. I pull my phone from my pocket and dial Marcus. It is almost 11 at night, but he answers on the second ring. He knows I never call this late unless the building is on fire. Eleanor. His voice is thick with sleep, but instantly alert. "Is everything all right? I need you to set up a meeting with Olivia first thing tomorrow morning," I say. My voice is calm, devoid of the tremor that shook my hands only an hour ago. 8 o'clock. In my office. Have the legal team ready. There is a pause on the other end. Marcus has worked for me for 15 years. He knows the difference between Eleanor the mother and Eleanor the chairman. I will make the call. Marcus says, "What is the agenda? Asset recovery?" I reply, "And lease termination." I hang up and step back inside, locking the balcony door. The sounds of the party are still thumping through the walls, muffled bass notes that vibrate against the floorboards. I sit at the small desk in the corner and open my laptop. I bypass the guest Wi-Fi and connect via my secure hotspot. I log into the Westwind Meridian executive portal. The screen populates with data. I pull up the files one by one. Asset Penthouse Unit 38B. Current tenant Daniel Marsh. Lease status active. Subsidized. Asset Vehicle Fleet 402 Tesla Model X. Authorized user Daniel Marsh. Account Corporate Black Card 9902. Supplementary holder Brianna Cole. I stare at the numbers. They are just lines of code, but they represent my love and my stupidity. I am about to close the window when a notification pops up on my browser. It is a Google alert I set for family mentions, a habit from when I worried about their safety. This one is a link to a podcast titled Modern Charity Women Who Give Back. I click the link. It was recorded 2 weeks ago. Brianna's voice fills the room through my headphones. It is not easy. She is saying to the host, "My husband's mother." Well, she worked very hard as a nurse, but she didn't plan well for retirement. When she had nowhere to go, Daniel and I didn't hesitate. We took her in. We gave her a home. It is a sacrifice to give up your privacy, but that is what family does. I feel a physical blow to my chest. Nurse. Didn't plan well. Took her in. I watch the video feed. Brianna is smiling that practiced, benevolent smile, looking like a saint while wearing the diamond earrings I bought her for Christmas. She is using my supposed poverty to polish her halo. She is building a brand on a lie, and I am the prop. That is the moment the last thread of guilt snaps. I open my email client. I type a new message to Marcus. The subject line is simple. Immediate action required. Marcus. Effective tomorrow morning. Initiate the process to terminate all financial and housing privileges for Daniel Marsh and Brianna Cole. Revoke the vehicle authorization. Cancel the supplementary credit card. Serve the eviction notice for the penthouse in accordance with the lease terms. Follow the letter of the law, but do not offer any grace periods. Eleanor? I hit send. I stand up and go to the closet. I pull out my suitcase. It is a small, battered leather bag that I used when I was scouting warehouse locations 20 years ago. It has traveled thousands of miles with me. It knows who I am. I pack 2 shirts, a pair of trousers, and my toiletries. I do not need anything else. I have money to buy whatever I need. and for the first time in years, I am going to use it. I zip the bag shut. I take one last look at the room that was supposed to be my sanctuary, but became my cage. I open the bedroom door. The party is winding down, but there are still a dozen people in the living room. I walk down the hallway, the wheels of my suitcase humming softly on the hardwood. As I pass the archway to the living room, I hear Brianna's voice one last time. She is holding a fresh glass of wine, leaning in to whisper to a friend. Honestly, she is just so difficult sometimes, Brianna says, rolling her eyes. But what can you do? She has nowhere else to go. I do not stop. I do not look at her. I walk straight to the front door, open it, and step out into the hallway. The heavy door clicks shut behind me, sealing them inside the trap they do not even know they are in. I press the button for the elevator, ready to descend 38 floors and rise back up as the woman I used to be. The next morning, the sun did not rise gently over the skyline district. It struck the glass facade of the West Wind Meridian Tower with a blinding, sterile light. I sat at the head of the mahogany conference table in my office on the top floor. It felt strange to be back in this chair after 5 years of sitting on a lumpy guest room mattress, but the leather warmed quickly to my touch. Olivia, my chief legal counsel, slid a thin stack of papers across the polished wood. We have 2 options. Eleanor? Olivia said, her voice crisp and professional. We can offer a graduated reduction in benefits over 6 months to avoid shock. Or we can execute a hard stop based on the breach of implied contract and at-will tenancy laws. I looked at the papers. I thought about the way Daniel had looked down at his shoes while his wife humiliated me. I thought about the $45 bottle of wine they drank while implying I was a leech. Do it fast, I said, my voice flat. Rip the bandage off. I want the car returned today. I want the credit card cancelled 10 minutes ago, and send the lease termination notice immediately. Give them the state-mandated 45 days to vacate, not 1 day more. The attack began at 10 in the morning. It was silent, invisible, and devastating. Down in the parking garage of the penthouse building, Daniel was walking toward the white Tesla Model X, likely nursing a hangover and running late for a client meeting. He was intercepted by 2 men from my asset recovery team. They wore navy blue windbreakers with the discreet West Wind Meridian Compass logo on the chest. Mr. Marsh, one of them asked politely, but blocked the driver's side door. I am afraid we are here to collect the fleet vehicle. The authorization has been revoked by the corporate office. What Daniel asked, blinking in the fluorescent light. There must be a mistake. My mother. I have authorization. The authorization was cancelled effective 8 this morning, the man replied, holding out his hand. The key fob, please, or we will have to tow it. At the exact same moment, 3 miles away at the Cherry Creek Shopping Center, Brianna was standing at the counter of a high-end boutique. She had a silk evening gown draped over her arm for an upcoming gala. She handed the black titanium card to the cashier with that careless, practiced wrist flick she loved so much. The cashier ran it. She frowned. She ran it again. I am sorry, ma'am, the cashier said, her voice loud enough for the woman behind Brianna to hear. It is declined. That is impossible. Brianna snapped, her face flushing pink. Run it again. It is a Centurion card. It does not have a limit. It says, account closed, pickup card, the cashier said, reaching for a pair of scissors. Brianna snatched the card back and dialed the concierge number on the back, her fingers trembling with rage. She put it on speakerphone. too angry to care about privacy. "Why is my card not working?" she demanded. "Security verification," the operator's voice said smoothly. "The primary card holder, Eleanor Marsh, has reported the supplementary card lost or stolen and requested immediate closure of the account. Have a nice day." Back at the apartment, Daniel's phone pinged with an email notification. It was from Westwind Meridian Property Management. The subject line was stark: "Notice of non-renewal and lease termination." He called the number at the bottom of the email, his voice rising in panic. "I don't understand," Daniel shouted into his phone as he paced the living room he thought he owned. "I have lived here for 3 years. You can't just kick us out. I want to speak to the owner. I am afraid that information is confidential," the property manager replied, following the script Olivia had written. "The owner has exercised their right to reclaim the unit for corporate use. You have 45 days to surrender the keys. If you wish to contest this, please submit a request in writing." "Who is the owner?" Daniel screamed. "Is it some hedge fund? I will sue them." "It is a private holding company." "Sir, have a good day." By noon, Brianna had stormed back to the apartment. She found Daniel sitting on the sofa, looking pale. She did not hug him. She threw her purse on the floor. "Your mother is playing dirty," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. She cancelled the card. She must have called the leasing office too. She is trying to manipulate us because her feelings are hurt. You need to go to her old company. Go to this Westwind place. Demand to speak to whoever manages her pension or whatever benefits she has. Threaten to sue them for elder abuse or contract fraud. Just fix it, Daniel. Desperate and confused. Did what he was told. He took a rideshare to the address listed on the eviction email. He had never been to the headquarters. He had never cared enough to ask where the money came from. He walked through the revolving glass doors of the Westwind Meridian Tower. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and steel, soaring 3 stories high. Security guards stood at the elevators. It smelled of money and power. Daniel walked toward the reception desk, but he stopped halfway. To his right, there was a massive gallery wall titled "Our History." It featured black and white photographs of the company's origins. He saw a picture of a dusty truck from 1995. He saw a photo of a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a warehouse in 2005. And then, his eyes locked on the central portrait. It was a large, framed photograph of 2 people standing in front of a fleet of trucks. One was his father, Jack, looking young and strong. Standing next to him, wearing a hard hat and holding a set of blueprints, was me. I looked fierce. I looked unstoppable. Daniel stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. He read the brass plaque underneath the photo. Jack and Eleanor Marsh, co-founders of Westwind Meridian Group. He looked at the date. He looked at my face in the photo, then at his own reflection in the glass. The colour drained from his skin. The anonymous landlord, the corporate fleet, the company card. It was never a nameless corporation. It was never a stroke of luck. "Oh my God," Daniel whispered, his voice cracking. It was all her. I did not witness the moment my son's world finally shattered, but I know every detail of it. I know it from the security logs in Marcus's office, from the trembling confession of my mother, Lydia, and from the devastating silence that followed. It is strange to reconstruct the destruction of your own child's ego, but I do it with the precision of a forensic accountant. Daniel stormed into Marcus's office on the 39th floor, bypassing the secretary. He was sweaty, dishevelled. and terrifyingly naive. He slammed his hand on the desk, demanding to know who was ruining his life. "Who is doing this?" Marcus Daniel shouted, his voice cracking. "I know you signed the lease. I know you signed the car authorization. Who is pulling the strings? Is it some competitor? Is it a hostile takeover?" Marcus sat calmly behind his desk, steepling his fingers. He looked at Daniel with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "The primary owner has decided to cease all discretionary benefits." "Daniel," Marcus said evenly, "it is a portfolio correction. I cannot change it." "I want a name," Daniel yelled. My father worked for this company. He drove trucks for you people. You owe his family some respect." Marcus stood up then. He walked over to the window, looking out at the logistics yard visible in the distance. "Your father did not just drive trucks for us." "Daniel?" Marcus said softly. "He founded this company. Jack used to tell me." "Marcus, the boy can have the kingdom one day, but only if he learns to build the castle brick by brick. If you give it to him, he will just sell the stones." Daniel went silent. It was the first time he had ever heard his father spoken of as an architect of industry rather than a laborer. The cognitive dissonance made him dizzy. When Marcus refused to say more, Daniel drove his rental car to the recovery center where my mother, Lydia, lives. She is 85, frail as a dried leaf, but her mind is still sharp. She has watched this tragedy unfold for years, biting her tongue because I asked her to. Daniel sat by her bedside, holding her hand, begging for answers. "Grandma, tell me," he pleaded. "Mom, she is just a nurse, right? She is just a retired nurse. None of this makes sense." Lydia pulled her hand away. She looked at him with cloudy eyes that held no sympathy. "You are a fool, Danny," Lydia whispered. "Your mother and father lived on instant noodles for 5 years so they could buy their first warehouse. I watched Eleanor negotiate with union leaders while she was pregnant with you. I watched her mortgage her own soul to build Westwind. But she never said anything." Daniel stammered. "Did you ever ask?" Lydia snapped, her voice surprisingly strong. "Did you ever once actually ask her how she made her money? Or did you just prefer to think you were saving her? It felt good, didn't it? To think you were the big, successful man taking care of the poor little widow." The words hit him like a physical blow. Daniel slumped in the chair. He replayed the last decade in his mind. He remembered the times I tried to talk to him about insurance premiums or supply chain management, and how he would smile condescendingly and change the subject to his interior design projects. He remembered Brianna telling their friends, "His mum is so sweet, but simple." He had built his entire identity on the lie that he was the superior one. Lydia reached into her nightstand drawer. Her shaking hands pulled out a yellowed envelope. "She left this here years ago," Lydia said, "in case something happened to her. She wanted you to have it when you were enough of a man to understand it." Daniel opened the envelope. It was a copy of a draft will from 10 years ago. It detailed the distribution of assets. "To my beloved son, Daniel Marsh, 40% of the voting shares of Westwind Meridian Group, to be held in trust until he demonstrates capable stewardship. 40%. He was staring at an inheritance worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He was staring at an empire he had just been evicted from because his wife told the Empress she was a charity case." Daniel dropped the paper. It fluttered to the sterile hospital floor. He did not cry because he lost the penthouse. He did not cry because he lost the Tesla. He put his head in his hands and wept because he finally saw himself clearly. I told her. Daniel choked out, his voice broken and small. I told her she was only there because we felt sorry for her. He realized then that he was not the benefactor. He was the beggar who had spit in the face of the Queen. And for the first time in his life, the tears that fell onto his knees were not tears of frustration, but tears of absolute, crushing shame. The collapse of Brianna's curated world did not happen with a bang. It happened with the quiet, suffocating pressure of simple mathematics. Without my black card and the subsidized rent, the lifestyle she had built on Instagram was mathematically impossible. I watched the desperation unfold from a distance, tracking it through the frantic emails she sent to my lawyer and the sudden silence on her social media feed. 2 days after the eviction notice arrived, Brianna sat at the kitchen island of the penthouse, surrounded by bills she had never bothered to look at before. She realized that Daniel's salary as an interior designer could barely cover the lease on a standard apartment, let alone the maintenance fees for a luxury unit or the payments on a new car. "You have to fix this." "Daniel," Brianna snapped, throwing a foreclosure warning for a credit line onto the marble counter. "Go to the bank. Take out a loan. Or better yet, go talk to your mother again. Tell her I was just stressed. Tell her I am sorry." Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the city he now knew belonged to his mother's company. He did not turn around. "I can't do that." "Brianna?" Daniel said, his voice heavy with a new, painful awareness. "I can't ask her for money anymore. Everything we have, the roof, the car, the clothes, it was all hers. And I stood right there while you told her she was a charity case. I humiliated her." "So what?" Brianna screamed, slamming her hand on the table. "She is your mother. She is supposed to support us. She has millions. Daniel, millions. And she is letting us drown because of one bad dinner." When Daniel refused to beg, Brianna decided to take matters into her own hands. She sent me an email. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. It started with a flowery apology, but the final paragraph contained a veiled threat. She hinted that if I cut them off, she might be forced to share her story of financial abandonment with her 50,000 followers. She thought she was playing poker. She did not realize she was sitting at a table with the woman who built the casino. I did not reply. I forwarded the email to Olivia. An hour later, Olivia sent a formal response. It was 3 sentences long. "Dear Ms. Cole, all voluntary financial support has ceased effective immediately. Any attempt to use Mrs. Marsh's name or private financial details for public defamation will be met with an immediate lawsuit for libel and breach of privacy. Please govern yourself accordingly." But I was not done. Revenge is not just about taking back money. It is about revealing the truth. My legal team sent a discreet package to the ethics committee of the law firm where Brianna worked as a junior associate. It contained the recording of her podcast appearance. In the clip, she claimed to be the sole provider for an indigent relative while using my assets to bolster her image as a benevolent philanthropist. It was a clear violation of professional integrity. By Wednesday, the firm had placed her on unpaid administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. The internet was even less forgiving. Someone, perhaps a rival or a former friend, found the contradiction between her self-made hashtags and the public property records that were now surfacing. A clip went viral on a local forum. It showed Brianna preaching about giving back, spliced with photos of her vacationing on my credit card. The comments section, which used to be her source of validation, turned into a firing squad. Imagine lecturing people on charity while living in your mother-in-law's penthouse for free. One user wrote, "She isn't a boss, babe. She is a parasite," wrote another. Brianna watched her follower count plummet by the hour. Her brand was toxic. She turned her rage on the only person left in the room. "You are useless," Brianna yelled at Daniel as she threw designer clothes into a suitcase. "You let her do this to me. You didn't protect your wife. You should have forced her to apologize. You should have fought for what is ours." Daniel stood in the middle of the living room. The boxes were piling up around him, dismantling the stage set of his life. He looked at the woman he had married, really seeing her for the first time. "Mom doesn't owe you an apology, Brianna," Daniel said quietly. "She gave us everything, and we spat in her face. If anyone owes an apology, it is me. And you?" Brianna stopped packing. She looked at him with cold, dead eyes. The mask of the loving partner slipped off completely, revealing the calculator underneath. "I am going to stay with my parents in Phoenix," she said, zipping up her Louis Vuitton bag. "I can't live like this. I can't live with a man who lets his mommy bully him." She walked to the door, the sound of her heels echoing on the hardwood floor that I paid for. She paused with her hand on the handle. "When you get it back, Daniel," she said without looking at him. "When you get the house, the car, and the status back, then you can call me. Until then, don't bother." The door slammed shut. Daniel stood alone in the darkening penthouse. The silence was absolute. He looked around at the empty shelves and the cardboard boxes filled with objects that used to define him. He realized then that my revenge was not just about punishment. I had stripped away the money, and in doing so, I had stripped away the lies. The woman who claimed to love him for his talent had walked out the moment the credit card was cancelled. He sat down on the floor and buried his face in his hands. He was bankrupt, homeless, and alone. But for the first time in 3 years, the life he was living was actually real. For the next 3 months, I became a ghost in my son's life. I did not visit him. I did not call him. Instead, I watched his reconstruction through the lens of bank notifications, legal updates, and the quiet reports Marcus placed on my desk every Friday morning. Daniel did not fall into the abyss. He climbed down into the trenches. He moved out of the Skyline district and rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Aurora. It is on the 4th floor of a building with no elevator and a communal laundry room in the basement. The rent is $1,200 a month. For the first time in his adult life, Daniel signed the lease without a guarantor. He sat at a laminate table, calculated his net income against his expenses, and realized that a $4 coffee was a luxury he could no longer afford. He also made a change at work that surprised me. He went to the partners at his architecture firm and asked to be transferred to the public interest division. It meant a 20% pay cut and long hours working on retrofitting aging structures for safety compliance. His boss thought he was having a nervous breakdown, but Daniel insisted. "I need to build things that actually matter," he had reportedly said. Then came the money. One afternoon, Marcus walked into my office holding a financial statement. He looked perplexed. "Eleanor, look at this," Marcus said, placing the paper in front of me. "The account for the cancelled credit card. We received a payment." I looked at the line item. Incoming transfer $500. Source D, Marsh Personal Checking. He was not legally obligated to pay that debt. It was in my name. But he was paying it back, chipping away at the thousands of dollars Brianna had spent on handbags and spa treatments. He was accepting the cost of his blindness. "Do you want me to return it?" Marcus asked. "No," I said, tracing the line with my finger. "Let him pay. It is the only way he will value the balance when it reaches 0. I kept my distance. But one night in February, the distance closed to a few yards. I was being driven home from a late meeting. Snow was falling heavily, blanketing the city in white silence. As my car stopped at a red light on Colfax Avenue, I looked out the window. There he was. Daniel was walking down the sidewalk, head down against the wind. He was wearing a thin wool coat that was stylish but useless against the Denver chill. He was clutching a grease-stained cardboard box, a cheap pizza. He looked tired. He looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of the arrogance that used to armor him. My hand instinctively reached for the door handle. Every cell in my body screamed the same command. Go to him. Buy him a warm coat. Take him to a steakhouse. Fix it. But I froze. I watched my son shiver. I watched him shift the pizza box to warm his hands. If I stepped out of this car now, I would not be saving him. I would be interrupting him. He was learning how to survive the winter, and that is a lesson that cannot be taught in a heated penthouse. The light turned green. Drive on, please. I told the driver, my voice barely a whisper. I learned later, through the grapevine of social media and small-town gossip that somehow reaches even the high towers, that Daniel was finding a new kind of wealth. He started fixing things for his neighbors. He repaired a broken cabinet for an elderly retired teacher down the hall. He helped a plumber on the second floor draft a layout for a bathroom renovation in exchange for help fixing his own leaky radiator. He was no longer the man who looked down on people from the 38th floor. He was the guy on the 4th floor who owned a screwdriver and knew how to use it. My phone would buzz occasionally late at night. Short texts from him. No requests for money. No complaints. I understand now. One read. I am trying hard not to be the man I was that night. Read another. I read every single one. I saved them to a secure folder, but I never typed a reply. Not yet. Then came the catalyst. Marcus came into my office with a thick dossier. It was the list of finalists for the Urban Reset Grant, a major funding initiative Westwind Meridian was sponsoring to revitalize low-income housing blocks. The applications were submitted anonymously to ensure fairness. You should see this one, Marcus said, sliding a proposal across the mahogany. Project 494. A plan to convert the old textile mill on the east side into affordable micro-apartments. The design is brilliant, cost-effective, dignified, sustainable. I flipped through the blueprints. The lines were confident. The understanding of materials was practical, not theoretical. It was the work of someone who knew that a home is more than just aesthetics. It is shelter. Who is the architect? I asked. Marcus hesitated. The blind was lifted this morning for the final review. It is Daniel Marsh. He applied as an independent contractor. He has no idea Westwind is the primary donor behind the grant. I stared at the name typed on the cover page. He was not asking his mother for a job. He was pitching a business proposal to a corporation. He was standing on his own merit. Schedule the final defense for the board, I said, closing the folder. If he wants this grant, he has to win it in the boardroom. He doesn't know you are the chairman of the board. Eleanor, Marcus warned quietly. He thinks you are just a silent shareholder. Walking into that room, it will be a shock. Good, I said. standing up and walking to the window to look out at the city my husband and I had built. Life is a shock. If he can stand in front of me and sell this vision without stuttering, without begging, and without using our last name as a crutch, then he is ready. I turned back to Marcus. Set the meeting for Monday at 9 o'clock. It is time for us to meet. Monday morning at 9 o'clock. The air in the West Wind Meridian boardroom was thin and sharp. I sat at the head of the long oak table, flanked by Marcus and Olivia. I was not wearing the beige cardigan I used to wear to cook Daniel dinner. I was wearing a charcoal Armani suit, and in front of me sat a heavy brass nameplate that read, Eleanor Marsh, Chairman. The heavy double doors opened. Daniel walked in, clutching his portfolio. He looked tired, but his shirt was pressed, and his eyes were clear. He stopped dead when he saw me. He looked at Marcus, then at the nameplate, and finally at my face. His jaw tightened, but he did not run. Please take a seat. Mr. Marsh, I said, my voice stripping away every ounce of maternal warmth. We are ready to hear your proposal for the Urban Reset Grant. Daniel stood there for a moment, his knuckles white against the black leather of his portfolio. He took a breath that shuddered in his chest. Thank you, Madam Chairman, he said softly. He set up his presentation. He did not look at me as his mother. He looked at me as the bank. He pitched the conversion of the textile mill. He spoke about cost efficiency, about using recycled materials to keep the overhead low. But then he went off script. The insulation needs to be grade A, Daniel said, looking at the board members. Because when you live on the 4th floor of a walk-up in February, you realize that heat isn't a luxury. It is dignity. People can't build a future if they are freezing in their own living rooms. The room was silent. He was not speaking from theory anymore. He was speaking from the cold nights in Aurora. The board members grilled him. They asked about risk assessment and cost overruns. Daniel answered every question with data, not charm. He did not smile. He did not drop my name. Finally, I raised my hand. The room went quiet. One final question. Mr. Marsh, I said, locking eyes with him. If this project fails, if the budget collapses and you lose everything, who will you blame? Daniel looked at me. For a second, I saw the little boy who used to scrape his knee and look for me to kiss it. But then that boy vanished, replaced by the man standing in front of me. No one. Daniel replied, his voice steady. If I fail, it is on me. I don't have the right to blame circumstances, or my mother, anymore. I held his gaze for a long 10 seconds. Then I looked at Marcus. The committee will deliberate, I said. 10 minutes later, we called him back in. West Wind Meridian will fully fund the project, I announced. Daniel's shoulders sagged with relief. However, the terms are non-negotiable. You will receive a standard project manager's salary, no bonuses, no company vehicle, no advance on equity. You report to the site at 6 in the morning like every other contractor. I accept, Daniel said immediately. I dismissed the board. Marcus and Olivia filed out, leaving the two of us alone in the cavernous room. The silence was heavy, filled with the ghosts of the last 6 months. I reached under the table and pulled out a manila envelope. I slid it across the polished wood until it hit his hand. Open it, I commanded. Daniel opened the flap. He pulled out the copies of the original penthouse deed, the Tesla registration, and the credit card statements. He saw my name on every single line. He stared at the papers. the physical proof of his blindness. That night at the party, I said, standing up and walking to the window. When you let your wife say I was only there because you felt sorry for me. I nodded. Do you know why? Because you were angry, Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. No. I turned to face him. I nodded because I agreed with her. It was my fault. I raised a son who did not know the value of the floor he was standing on. My revenge wasn't just about taking the money away. Daniel, it was about stripping you bare so you could finally see who you actually were without my checkbook. Daniel looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. Slowly. He sank to his knees on the plush carpet. He did not kneel to beg. He knelt in surrender. I am sorry, Mom. He choked out, tears finally spilling over. I am so sorry. I don't want the penthouse. I don't want the money. I want to be your son again. I walked over to him. My heart was breaking, but my face remained like stone. I reached down and touched his shoulder, not to comfort him, but to steady him. Stand up. Daniel, I said firmly. Marsh men do not kneel. He stood up, wiping his face with his sleeve. I am giving you an opportunity, I said. But forgiveness. You have to earn that. You earn that with every brick you lay and every family you house. I looked him in the eye and nodded once. It was the same nod from the party, but this time, it did not mean submission. It meant commencement. Now, get to work, I said. I picked up my briefcase and walked out the door, turning left toward my office. Daniel turned right toward the elevators to go to the construction site. We walked in opposite directions, but for the first time in years, we were finally on the same road. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from. So drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this journey, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need to hear it. See you in the next story.